Thank you so much. It's wonderful to be here with all of you. I always love being in a bookstore, and especially an independent bookstore like this one. Those of us who write books rely entirely on places like this, not just for selling our books, but for the inspiration that we hope leads us to write them. So I really appreciate this opportunity, and I always encourage people to patronize their independent bookstores and go online and figure out what books you want, then come here and buy them. I should add that lately I've left Boston University just as a minor correction. I'm now at the Watson Institute for International Studies at Brown University, which is a wonderful place for me to do research and work with some wonderful professors and great students. And these are professors and students who, like everyone else in America, have largely forgotten or never knew about the Dulles brothers. During the period when I was immersing myself in the lives of these extraordinary brothers, I came to realize how remarkable has been their fall from public consciousness. At the height of the Cold War, when they were in power in the 1950s, these were immensely powerful figures. They could make and break governments, and they did. Probably every literate human being on the face of the earth knew the name Dulles. Now, the Dulles brothers are largely forgotten. I realized this while I was writing the book because several times when friends of mine asked me, what are you working on? And I'd say, I'm writing a book about Dulles. They would look at me and say, the airport? The Dulles brothers' approach to the world did not work out well for the United States. And I think that's part of the reason why we've airbrushed them out of our history. They tell us some things about ourselves that we really don't like to see or hear. As a result, we've allowed them to fade from history. I think nations, like individuals, like to think of themselves as good. We all have a positive self-image of ourselves. And those episodes that contradict our good self-image are ones that we tend to like to minimize and forget. We like to pretend they never happened. This, to a certain degree, has happened with the Dulles brothers, and I figured that out when, in the course of writing this book, I found the video clip of President John F. Kennedy opening Dulles Airport. After John Foster Dulles died in 1959, President Eisenhower announced immediately that this big super airport that was being built out at Chantilly, Virginia, would be named Dulles Airport. Soon afterward, John F. Kennedy came into office. Kennedy didn't like this idea. John Foster Dulles was a crusty old cold warrior, and Kennedy wanted to present a different kind of an image. So he let it be known that the airport was not going to be named Dulles. It would probably be called Chantilly International. There was some talk that it might be named after George Marshall. But there was an immediate pushback. Eisenhower and Allen Dulles, who was still alive, put a lot of pressure on Kennedy, and finally he relented, and he agreed to name the airport after John Foster Dulles. And in this video clip, you see him giving his speech, and then he pulls aside a curtain, and there is that giant bust of John Foster Dulles that stands in the center of Dulles Airport. Now, those of you who have been through Dulles Airport might ask yourself, what bust is that? I asked myself that, and of course made a special trip to Dulles during one of my travels in order to go look at the bust, which is placed right at the center of the airport in front of the reflecting pool that the architect Eero Saarinen had designed as a way of calming the turbulent spirits of stressed out travelers. So all you have to do is find the reflecting pool, and there's the statue. So where's the reflecting pool? There is no reflecting pool. I asked the security guards, where is it? They don't know any reflecting pool. Okay, well then where's the bust of John Foster Dulles? Some of the security guards had no idea where the bust was, and some of them had no idea who John Foster Dulles was. It's a long story, but with the help of the Metropolitan Washington Airports Authority, I finally tracked down the bust of John Foster Dulles. It is in a closed conference room opposite baggage claim number 3. This really reflects what has happened to the reputation of the Dulles brothers. It's my desire with this book to bring them back to life in a way that shows how influential they were. But I really have another goal with this book. It's a biography of these two remarkable figures. But it's more than that. I'm trying to use the framework of biography to ask a larger question, which is, why does the United States act the way that it does in the world? Why are we like this? Why is it that every time there's some kind of a crisis or confrontation or upheaval in Bhutan or Belize or Bangladesh or Burundi or Bolivia, we feel like we have to take sides? Oh, who do we want to crush? Who do we want to support? What are we going to do? The idea that we're going to sit back and say, well, the Bolivians or the Bhutanese or the Bangladeshis have a problem and they're going to go resolve it and we'll just wait and see what unfolds. This was inconceivable to the Dulles brothers. And I think that's a strain that's woven into our body politic. Americans don't have this idea that we should just observe the world and watch it unfold. We have to be involved everywhere. In fact, the Dulles brothers were founders of the Council on Foreign Relations. And while I was researching that aspect of the book, I realized that the Council on Foreign Relations actually has a slogan. I hadn't realized this. But if you look on their magazine, Foreign Affairs, you'll see they have a logo. And the logo is a flying horse. It's the Pegasus figure. And then there's a little scribble in the circle, which I always thought was just chicken scratch. I never really paid attention to it. But I looked at it more closely as I was working on this book, and I see that it's a Latin word. And the word is ubique, means everywhere. That is the answer to these great questions. Where does the United States have vital interests? Where must the United States be involved? Where do we have to have operations underway all the time? Everywhere. That was the concept that guided the Dulles brothers and the foreign policy establishment that ruled this country really for the first half of the 20th century, right into the 1960s. What's remarkable about this elite is how small it was. In those days, American foreign policy was really the province of a very small group of people. They all went to the same schools. They were all white Protestant males. They were all wealthy. They all worked for the same law firms and the same investment banks. They all had the same outlook on the world. It was a very inbred group, and they all shared the same view of the world. The Dulles brothers were perhaps the ultimate exemplars of that view. Now, in my book, I don't just talk about the Dulles brothers as political figures. I'm trying to understand them as individuals, and that's why I take their story all the way back to early childhood and before. The Dulles brothers were really vessels of American history. So let me tell you a little bit about the forces that shaped them, because I think these are also forces that shaped our country. The Dulles brothers really are us. We are them. They did not hijack America or American foreign policy. They did what we wanted, and I think that might be one of the reasons we've forgotten them. If we really want to find who's to blame for many of the crises that the Dulles brothers left behind, rather than point a finger at the picture of the Dulles brothers on the wall, maybe looking in the mirror would be a little more effective. So what were these forces that shaped these remarkable brothers? Well, the first one was missionary Calvinism. The Dulles brothers grew up in a parsonage. Their father was a clergyman, their grandfather was a clergyman, their great-grandfather was a clergyman. Many of their uncles and great-uncles were clergymen and also missionaries. Their grandfather, for example, went off to India to convert the heathens. And at home, over dinner, they were always having missionaries who were on their way back from China or back from the Middle East. So they were immersed in the missionary ethos. This was not just a bland or heterodox form of Christianity. It was a very specific form. And it had two essential principles. The first is the world is made up of good forces and evil forces. And the second is Christians